when I try to understand what it would mean for God to create a world, if God has all the powers we attribute to God, the problem of free will looms large. And it seems to one to be inversely proportional to the other. The stronger God gets, the weaker our will gets, and vice versa. If you want to have a robust free will, you have to have God's providence and sovereignty be lower, and the future has to be open, and God has to wonder what's happening in the future. It seems like there's this balance between them. I think you disagree with that, but I can't imagine how.
Well, if creation works by God simply seeing and willing us in the same moment, then there is no decision on God's part as to what we're going to do independently of simply creating us. And as he creates us, he already sees us doing that thing. So it's as if we're already on hand by the time God makes the decision to create us. That is to say, there is no blank to be filled in as to what decisions we're going to make, what our actions are going to be. In the very conception of us, all of those things are there, but it's also the case that in the very conception of us, we are willed so that our existence is provided for.
So it sounds like you have a very strong view of God's providence, of
Right.
God's absolute control, but that also sounds like you have a predestination approach, not only to things like salvation, but to everything that happens in the world, whether my hand is here or over here at any given time, has already been predestined. I think it's not, but I'm fooling myself.
Well, but it's not pre. I mean, it simply is what it is.
It's set. It's set.
In this sense, that its existence is provided for by God, but only its existence. None of the character of the world is owing to God's active creation. Only its existence. The character is what...
But that existence includes the orientation and structure and movement and momentum and force of every particle at every moment in history.
Exactly.
That sounds like you've now agreed with what I said, that everything is set. Because if every particle in the entire universe, 10 to the 90th photons, 10 to the 80th leptons and electrons, whatever they are, the position, momentum, everything that you can describe that character are absolutely set for all time. God knows it and God sees it. If that's the case, I can't imagine where any kind of free will comes from.
Well, all right.
It seems like then this whole world is like a film.
Okay. All right. Now on this view, right? And I guess in part I'm saying trust me. On this view, to say it's set is simply to say it exists, right? It exists from this timeless perspective. Okay, but that doesn't mean that for us time or the passage of time is not real. I don't think you can eliminate the passage of time. There are people who think you can. But I think that from our perspective, there is such a thing as the passage of time. I think it's very real. I don't think our perspective is some grand deception. Right? And so to say that these things are said, that is, let's say from the perspective of God, all that means is to say that they exist. Simply to provide for something's existence doesn't alter its nature at all. Right? So if whether we're free or not, or whether what happens in the world depends on, let's say, whether a transfer of momentum or spin or energy from another particle to the particle that we're talking about at the moment, all that still happens, right? And it's all real. Okay, so and from our perspective, those are the things, and as far as the natural course of events is concerned, those are the things that determine the character of what will follow. The only thing that God determines is the existence of the whole thing, of the whole shebang.
Let me try to draw an analogy, because many scientists believe that the world, with no God whatsoever, is a closed system and has a deterministic history. Therefore, we could not have done otherwise at any given moment. But they are what's called compatible. You know what this is, that we're still free because our freedom can be compatible with a deterministic world that's set by pure physics. The laws of physics and the initial conditions of the universe set the pattern. We can't do otherwise, but because nobody's holding a gun to my head or I'm not mentally deluded, I still have a form of free will that's compatible.
Right.
No, that's not good enough to some people, not good enough to me.
Nor for me.
But your God is doing the same thing and doing it tougher because you can't, maybe there's some flexibility in the laws of physics, but there's no flexibility in God. So your determinism is even tougher. And you have a harder time giving me libertarian free will.
Well, I don't think I do. And the reason is because I don't see God as a cause that operates upon us, right? As far as any worldly causes are concerned, there is no difference between what the most freewheeling libertarian would want and what there is on my model of creation. There's nothing in the world that determines our behavior. Okay. The only thing you can ask is there something in this other world? Is there something in God that determines our behavior? And what I want to say is no, for two reasons. First of all, as I say, God sees and creates us whole. It's not as though there's a blank to be filled in after we're created. We're seen. Think of a person with free will as having a nature that is, in a sense, incomplete. Right? What it does doesn't depend on what it already is. All right. Okay, we fill in that nature through our exercises of free will. What God sees is us in our entire career, and so he sees us, as it were, filling in that nature. But he's not filling it in. He just wills the existence of the whole thing.
I think you're dealing with half the problem, and I can go with you there. I can see how a timeless God can see this picture and do it in a way where we still have freedom. But you add a bigger piece. You said that God is the act of creation and the act of will is setting that pattern. So you're saying that original creative act set that pattern. So it's not just God seeing it from eternity. God is setting it from eternity.
Well, let me add the second point I was having to do with creation that may help. It may not. A lot of people think that creation works this way, that God issues some sort of command, and then the command causes things to exist. Well, it can't be that way, because if it were, then God would have to create the causal nexus that joins commands with existence. And, well, then why bother? Why not just that he'd have to create that directly? So why not just create what exists directly? Okay, so there's no command and causation operation going on here. All there is God doing this conceiving that is at once willing, and the content of his will is us. It's not the product, but the content of his will is the reality that is us.
But that content, once it's set, is absolutely
once it's
determined.
Set, it's all once it's set, we're here. It's done. We've already done the things, but it's not determined in the sense that we have to worry about the next time we make a decision, that there's some forces at work that are going to control things. There are no forces at work to control it. What God willed was that we make that decision just as we think that we're making it, spontaneously, intentionally. It's just that he's responsible for the existence of it, not us.
What's the it? What's the it that God
of the decision? Of our decision, of our acts of will.
He's responsible for our acts of will.
Only for their existence.
He's responsible for their existence. But
we're responsible for the acts of will.
We're responsible for it, but God is responsible for the existence in some generic pattern, or the existence of a specific decision to go this way or this way.
There's only one decision that he even sees, and that's the decision that we actually make.
And you're comfortable that that's fully
well, that's
free will?
That's the only way it is, because after all, it's not as if God is looking at two options for Bob Kuhn and two options for Hugh McCann as to the next word we're going to say. There's only one, and that's the one who says what we say freely.